What if I told you there were thousands of words just waiting to be discovered, but you're stuck using the same ones over and over again? That was me with English vocabulary. Every conversation felt like a puzzle with missing pieces, and I couldn't find the right words to complete it. Hi, I'm Sarah, and I'm 17 years old. I live in a small city where life is always moving. There's always something going on, but sometimes it feels like I'm just a spectator in my own life. English has always been a part of my daily routine. I've spoken it for as long as I can remember, but I always felt something was missing. No matter how many English books I read, how many movies I watched, or how much time I spent speaking with friends, my vocabulary felt limited. I knew the basics, of course, common words that everyone uses in everyday conversations, but when it came to expressing myself more deeply or understanding complex ideas, I struggled. I remember feeling frustrated, especially when I tried to read novels or listen to podcasts in English. It felt like there was a barrier between me and the content. Sometimes I would come across a word or phrase that I didn't know, and it would make me feel inadequate. It was as though there was a whole world of words out there, just out of my reach. I knew that my vocabulary wasn't just affecting my reading or listening, it was limiting my ability to fully express myself in conversations, whether with friends, family, or teachers, and that bothered me. At school, we were often given assignments where we were asked to use advanced vocabulary, but I would freeze up. I could always get by with simple words, but I wanted to sound more articulate and confident. One day, my English teacher gave us a project to write an essay on the importance of language in communication. I wanted to do well, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't know the words to describe the complexity of language. I felt stuck. That night, I sat at my desk and stared at the assignment, wondering how I could possibly write something meaningful if I couldn't express myself the way I wanted to. I started thinking, why is it so hard for me to learn new vocabulary? And that's when it hit me. Maybe there's a way I can change this. I didn't want to feel stuck anymore. I wanted to learn. I wanted to grow, and I knew I had to find a way to make that happen. The next morning, I woke up with a new sense of determination. I was no longer going to let my vocabulary hold me back. I needed a plan, something that would help me break through this barrier. I started thinking about the ways people usually expand their vocabulary. I knew I had to get creative because just memorizing lists of words wasn't going to be enough. I wanted to learn words that would actually help me express my thoughts and ideas better, not just words that looked good on paper. I began with a simple goal: learn 5 new words every day. It didn't seem like much, but I knew it would add up over time. I would write the words down in a notebook, along with their meanings and examples of how to use them in sentences. The first few days were exciting, like opening the door to a whole new world of expression. I'd come across words like melancholy, exuberant, and ephemeral, and I could feel the power they held. I was starting to feel more confident, but there was a problem. I wasn't remembering them as well as I'd hoped. One evening, as I was reviewing my vocabulary list, I realized I needed a better way to make these words stick. It wasn't enough to just write them down. I needed to actively use them in my everyday life. I started finding ways to incorporate the new words into my conversations, even if it felt awkward at first. For example, instead of saying, "I feel sad," I would say, "I feel melancholy today." At first, it felt strange to use these new words, but the more I practiced, the more natural it became. My friends and family would look at me curiously when I used a new word, but they didn't mind. In fact, they started asking me what certain words meant, which made me feel even more motivated. I also discovered something interesting about my learning process. Reading and listening to English content became more enjoyable. I could finally understand some of the deeper meanings in books and movies. Words I'd never noticed before popped out at me, and they weren't just random words. They were words that helped me understand the world in a deeper way. I felt like I was unlocking a treasure chest of knowledge, and each word I learned was a valuable piece. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Some days, I'd forget the words I'd learned or struggle to use them correctly. There were moments of doubt when I felt like I wasn't progressing fast enough. But I didn't give up. I kept going, reminding myself that this was a journey, not a race. A few weeks into my vocabulary challenge, I started to notice something incredible. My confidence was growing. Words that once felt foreign to me were now becoming familiar, and I was using them without thinking twice. I was no longer struggling to express myself in simple sentences. I could paint pictures with my words. I felt like I had a whole new toolkit of expressions at my disposal. I could describe a sunset as breathtaking, talk about my day as exhilarating, or explain my thoughts as nuanced. It felt amazing. But just as things were looking up, a challenge appeared. I was working on a school essay about the impact of social media on society, and I wanted to use my new vocabulary. But the more I tried to incorporate the words I had learned, the more I realized they didn't always fit the context. Some of the words I had memorized just didn't sound right in certain situations. I had a tendency to overuse the words I knew, hoping they would add depth to my writing, but they often made my sentences sound forced or unnatural. That was a frustrating moment. I felt like I was back at square one. Had I really learned anything? Was I just collecting random words without understanding how to use them properly? I began to doubt myself. But instead of giving up, I decided to take a step back and reassess my approach. I realized that vocabulary wasn't just about learning fancy words. It was about knowing when and how to use them. So I focused on learning the context of words, not just their definitions. I started paying more attention to how native speakers used words in books, movies, and podcasts. I noticed that some words were used in specific situations, while others were more flexible. It was like learning to play a musical instrument. You had to know the right chords for the right song. I also began to read more challenging materials, novels, academic articles, and even scientific journals. Every time I came across a new word, I didn't just write it down. I'd pause, think about its meaning, and pay attention to how it was used in the sentence. Slowly, I started understanding not just the words, but the patterns behind them. This helped me use my growing vocabulary more naturally, and I felt like I was making real progress. Soon I began to feel a shift in how I approached language altogether. I was no longer learning English just to pass exams. I was learning to express myself in ways I'd never thought possible. And that made all the effort worth it. Looking back on everything I've learned, I can hardly believe how far I've come. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but each day of effort and persistence paid off in ways I never imagined. Learning new vocabulary has become more than just a task. It's become a part of who I am. I now speak with more confidence, write with more clarity, and read with greater understanding. Words no longer feel like barriers. They feel like bridges to deeper connections and broader ideas. One of the most exciting moments came when I was writing a speech for our school's annual event. It was about the importance of learning languages and how they shape our worldview. As I wrote, I realized how much my vocabulary had expanded. I was able to express my ideas clearly and creatively, using the right words to convey my thoughts. The words that once felt distant and unfamiliar now flowed effortlessly onto the page. When I gave the speech in front of the entire school, I could see the impact it had. People were listening closely, nodding along, and afterward, several teachers and students came up to compliment me. "Your speech was so well spoken," one of my teachers said. "You used such thoughtful language." Hearing that felt incredible. I had spent so long feeling insecure about my vocabulary, and now I was being recognized for my ability to communicate effectively. But I've learned that vocabulary is not just about impressing others, it's about connecting with them. The right words can open up conversations, build relationships, and express emotions that otherwise might remain hidden. Since then, I've used my vocabulary to connect with people in ways I couldn't have imagined before. Whether it's talking to a friend about something personal or discussing a book with a classmate, I now feel like I have the words to say exactly what I mean. As I continue to learn, I've realized that vocabulary is a lifelong journey. There's always more to discover, more words to master, and more ways to express myself. But I'm no longer afraid of making mistakes or feeling inadequate. Each new word I learn is a step forward, and every challenge along the way is an opportunity to grow. If you're struggling with your own vocabulary, don't get discouraged. The journey may take time, but with each word you learn, you're building a stronger foundation for self-expression. Keep going. You'll be amazed at how far you can go when you open your mind to the power of words. Now that you've heard how I transformed my English vocabulary, I want to hear from you. What's one word you've always struggled with, or a word you've recently discovered that you absolutely love? Drop it in the comments below, and let's start a conversation about the power of words. If you enjoyed my journey and found it inspiring, don't forget to like this video to show your support. Subscribe to stay updated with more stories and tips on personal growth. Share this with a friend who's looking to improve their vocabulary or language skills. Keep learning, keep growing, and remember, every word to discover brings you one step closer to mastering English. See you in the next video.